Let's see how long it takes to get the first question.
All right. So I'm sharing my screen. We are now broadcasting, and we're going to let people start to come on in. Hello, everybody out there in the wonderful wide world of internet. I think that now that live sports are done, we are the only live sport. So as part of today's webinar, we are going to pit two of our panelists against each other. What you don't know is we're actually all in the same building right now. And so we're going to actually go into the same room. Each of us will have one weapon, either a sword or some kind of hammer, and we will fight to the death. So I'm looking forward to that. You'll have to stay to the end of the webinar to see that, and you get to vote and choose which of us lives and which of us dies. So it should be a fun webinar. Also, there's some side betting going on, and so you can go ahead and wager on that. You can just, make your own bets, whatever it is.
Isn't that called Fortnite? Isn't that what my kids are playing? Isn't this Fortnite we're playing?
There's a high likelihood that the two guys with facial hair will probably kill the other people who don't have facial hair. I also have a category of people who believe that the Siegel brothers, Justin and James, will whoop the other two guys' ass. Again, don't know till it happens, but it should be bloody. All right.
We should have a poll about the best facial hair, actually, James. That'd be great.
Oh, we should. We should indeed.
Yeah, I'm glad, by the way, you guys went for facial hair. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I don't know what this is.
Yeah. Oh, wait. You have,
all right,
it's so gray. It's hard to see.
Thank you. All right. Can we do this now?
All right.
As we say in Jersey, let's do this.
Let's do this. I think we got enough people that had started to join. So I'd like to introduce you all to a wonderful panel. But before I do that, I wanted to set some rules. There are no rules. It's Fight Club. You just do what you want. Today, we're going to be talking about the architect's playbook for commercial real estate. And we have some really wonderful resources who've come together on this. First of all, we have Lance Amato, who is a principal with Vocon. This is a high-end, high-quality architecture and design firm with offices in Los Angeles, Cleveland, and New York. And they work with enterprise companies across the world, as well as large real estate portfolio owners. It is a real treat to have you here with us, Lance, so thanks for joining.
Thank you.
And we have Justin Siegel. Aside from his stunning good looks, charming personality, and ability to do over 300 push-ups in a month, Justin is the president of Boxer Property, and they have a number of different businesses. Stemmons, a software company in the real estate space. They have their Work Style brand, which is their flex space. And Justin's going to give us some perspective today on how they've addressed a lot of the uplift that you have to do for post-COVID across their broader portfolio, some of the design opportunities and choices that they've made in merging flex space with long-term commercial lease space. And overall, he's just got a lot of smart things to say. Justin, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. And then finally, but certainly not least, we have Michael Beckerman, CEO of CREtech. Michael, it's great to have you with us, as always.
Thanks, James. I'm really excited to be with you guys for another week. You know, we get so much feedback at CREtech about this webinar series, and I don't think there's anything I've done virtually yet that's getting such traction and positive feedback in the CREtech following. And I have to tell everybody, it's really James and Openpath that are really leading these webinars. And the content has provided such leadership and insights for our industry. And I couldn't be more proud of our collective industry for really leading the way and helping people and companies get back to work and showing them the way. And so I just want to credit you, James, and Openpath with all your leadership and insights. And I'm super excited for this webinar in particular, for just, sort of evolving the narrative and the discussion to get very specific about now what it's going to look like inside these spaces. So super, super thrilled to be part of it and join you guys again.
Thank you, Michael. So look, let me go through a bit of the agenda today. As always, you can submit questions via the Q&A posting tool on there. Just to give folks some feedback, we get a lot of questions that come in. And what we try to do as all of the panelists read those questions is we try to include those questions just naturally in the conversation that we're having, rather than read, hey, a listener writes in, I have a question about this. So we are trying to respond real time as you put those questions in. Toward the end, we have a Q&A section dedicated to trying to answer those, and we weave those into our discussion. So look, I will start a little bit with the framework that we always put in place. Then we'll get to Vocon's playbook for success post-COVID, talk about what Boxer is doing across their portfolio, and then open it up for Q&A. So the framework is the same as always, with a couple of updates, and this is the way we've looked at the next couple of phases over the next couple of years of post-COVID. Obviously, phase one we're still in, but there are some states that are entering phase two for get back to work. Phase three, of course, is going to be once we have some level of ability to understand and track immunity, whether it's vaccines that have come in or whether it's some level of contact tracing that's accurate, where people have antibodies and know they're not going to get sick. And that, of course, gets us to phase four, which is the new normal and just being pandemic ready. We've all talked about the fact that this pendulum is going to swing back and forth. We're seeing it right now as states open up and we see people emotionally excited to get out of the house and go back to work, people scared and wanting to stay in. The political reactions are happening and changing. The government has already put out its employer guidelines that we talked about last week in terms of what you need to do as an employer. I think one of the heated topics here for me is temperature checks. I have a perspective on that, which is that people should self-attest and manage their own temperature. And I don't necessarily know if everybody feels the same way about a third party coming in and measuring their temperature, but it's an open topic for discussion, certainly. Regardless, sanitation and making sure that you're in a clean environment and have all your personal protection gear with you. There's a lot of discussion, which we'll get into today in more detail, about what are the capital and OpEx investments that we have to do to ready our workplace for this new normal. And I think that whether it's touchless access from Openpath or cleaning stations, congestion-free lobbies, elevator capacity management, or any kind of tenant communication tools, I think the challenge that we've all run into and we talked about last week was who the hell is going to pay for all of this? And there's this conversation that we had last week about rent revenue going down. Owners are kind of struggling to meet their debt covenants. Lenders, have to reduce their yield to investors, and nothing is really shaken out yet, other than continuing business as normal, but with an anticipation and hope that rents rise in the coming months, people get back to work, and this becomes hopefully a temporary glitch. And if it's a long-term one, we're going to see some big shakedowns, I think, in the lending world, certainly in the building ownership space, as some buildings will change hands. Today, we're going to talk, though, about what's a long-term investment and what's a short-term investment. So use that lens as you listen to Lance, as you listen to Justin and Michael and I talk about some of the changes from a design perspective that go into our built space. I'd like to think about what is a long-term investment. And so if you look on this list on the left, whether it's congestion-free lobbies or cleaning stations or guards or capacity management and elevators, I think there's a big conversation happening about if I'm going to spend money now, I really want to make sure that money is well spent and well invested so that it improves the value of my building and is something I can capture back in increased rent. And I think that's the lens that we need to use. So with that, I will hand it over to Lance. And Lance, just let me, I'll click through as you want.
Oh, thank you so much. So today's aspect in conversation in preparedness for the new normal is really applying towards solutions for the various space strategies and how design and technology applies to those. And it is a very diverse topic. It's very broad in the approach, and I'd like to tackle those scenarios one by one and offer some suggestions, solutions towards it. So if you have the next slide. So in the evaluation and understanding solutions for coming back to work, we really have to broaden our perspective about the various markets that are under consideration, right? So the solutions we take can't really be done in such a large scale, very dense metropolitan area. It also needs to apply and be very respectful of those in the lesser markets, the suburban markets, things of that nature. But a resounding fact in the surveys that we have applied nationwide to our occupiers, to our landlords, a majority of the staff, the employees, consistently have said I want to come back to a safe environment. I want to feel safe. I want to know that my coworkers are safe. I want that space to be secure. And that's consistent, irrelevant of it being New York City, Los Angeles, Texas, or any others. But out of this whole scenario, there is something that has been embraced. We have taught a multi-general workforce how to utilize technology to be effective in business. And through that use of technology, people that have embraced, video conferencing and things of that nature, there is a level of effectiveness towards being productive from the home or somewhere else. And their perspective of having to have the day-by-day travel commute to get to work every single day, it sort of started waning. So how do we, as employers, as occupiers, as landlords, provide a balanced environment for the workforce today? Next slide. So this approach is really going to evolve over the course of time, and it's something that just needs to be said again. But the solutions that we're tactically enforcing today may or may not be permanent solutions in the long run. So as we designers, as we as end users, and as we as basically owners need to understand these solutions that we're putting in may be evolving, retracted, enhanced over the course of day one, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 2 years from now. But there will be a kind of an embrace of a new technology, new design platform, new solutions moving forward. The big kind of concern, or the question that does reside today, is once people actually get back to the work environment, getting back into offices, what is the tolerance of the informality of what we're doing here today? I'm sitting in my bedroom, we're all sitting in private offices, or we're sitting outside. The noise and the traction of the lawnmower, or your 4-year-old child busting in the middle of a conference call, is that going to be acceptable? Is there going to be an enhanced need, once people feel more comfortable coming back to work, for a professional environment? Right, and an environment goes a long case. It can go from a professional environment in your own household to a professional environment as a space, as a solution. If you have the next slide. So in either case, the HQ, the large scale hub, that place that you used to work at, is really trying to reconsider an approach. And a lot of people are very familiar with physical distancing strategies. And they're trying to understand necessarily, if I have to enforce these, what is the total occupants that I can have here, right? And what does that do when I apply my metrics to when I go to the workforce and say, I need you to come to work, but the reality is the end user needs them saying how many people we have to come to work, right? So the reduction of overall occupants in a space will be severely reduced, but in very interesting ways, right? So this is an example of one of our de-densification strategies that we did for a client. And through learning that, the task seating, the people in the open offices, there was a expected reduction in seat count. But a surprising fact during all these evaluations is that the conferencing spaces, those meeting spaces for 2, for 4, for 8, for 24 people, cannot accommodate the traditional expectations. A 12 desk can go to 2, because conference rooms are not necessarily built for this radius that we have to do. And we also have to understand what radius means too. 6 feet is 6 feet as mandated, but people move around, and a desk is a desk. You can shift around and move and flow. So that variable, that bubble, there has been conversation of it being 7.5 feet. Do you take the point of the circle from your mouth or from your actual body? There's a lot of conversation points when it goes to shift to that. If you have the next slide. So with that reduction of the total occupants in the floor plate, and also the question of the traditional conferencing space being very different because 8 people can't meet in one room anymore, how are employers effectively meeting and collaborating moving forward? And we're doing it today. We're doing it effectively today through Skype or video conference calls on our cell phones. But are people exploring new means and methods to make people feel more present in the work environment if they're working remotely? The aspect of AR and VR does come into play at certain employers and certain companies. People are exploring hologram technology to see if there's actually that type of level. But there is going to be, based on the economics and type of companies that we have here, a very degree of video conferencing and video presentation technologies that will take place, because again, the physical presence in the traditional physical room, that privatized room, will be reduced. If you take a slide. So what do we do with a kind of reduced occupant headcount in your traditional central hub zone? I hear a lot about these things, and I hear a lot of these webinars and conversations. And initially, a lot of the strategies when it came to headcount and occupiers were really facilities based. And as it started to shift towards human resource based, and it kind of evolved towards, we can bring this many people into this space. Once the HR conversation came into play, it got very kind of realistic about, well, I can fit this many people in here, but X number of those people want to stay at home. Because outside of it just being mass transit as a concern to the density and those solutions, the aspects of daycare facilities and summer camp probably being dead this summer because they may not exist. The effect of childcare as general also is creating new challenges for people to come in. So what do you do, and what type of environments do you create? And there's a variety of ways of solutions, and kind of driving to what this point of the conversation is here today, that a lot of occupiers and end users are providing. But we all are coming to the realization that what was our main office is turning into the central hub. And other environments and conversations and in tools, a variety of different types of forms are being embraced and utilized for 12 weeks, 6 months, or even the end of the year to have an effective work environment. And even large scale companies are actually considering a work from home scenario for a large quantity of individuals. So not one specific solution presented right now may not be the case for every single person, but it is interesting seeing the varied degrees of solutions that end users are taking to kind of push forward and be effective moving on. Hit the next slide. So the work from home scenario is really kind of the first and foremost point, and working at your dining table and working on your couch and those things might start to shift a little bit differently. I think there is an aspect of the work from home being a little bit more professional, and that conversation is starting to really resonate and evolve. I have seen and heard, and even had conversations with people that are renting out professional work environments for employers, for staff, for basically end users, individuals, to create more acoustical sound and ergonomic environment, because they're going to be sitting here for the long run. But employers are also suggesting equipment and tools for people to be more settled in. There might be an aspect of, you're going to have kind of your own home desktop. Everything that was in your HQ originally is going to be shifted back to your home environment. Because now that we're kind of settling in and we're shifting and moving forward, we need to get back to that level of professionalism, because the candor and people on the other end of the phone, the video and those calls might be sitting in the office. The aspect of flex office is really kind of a very strong understanding, a strong direction where a lot of people are going to. Something that may be embraced with a good community of individuals that an occupier might have in an outlying region of suburban market, might just say, well, if we do a zip code analysis and heat map 1,000 people, and we have 20 people that might be in one zone, what can we do with those 20 people where they can work effectively and as part of the organization outside of the home, right? And the aspect of a solution, the flex office, is one of those considerations that a lot of people are thinking about, because they can actually just rent those and actually have something that is a comfortable and safe work environment for the employers who can disconnect from their house and actually have kind of the work setting kind of away from this. If you hit the next one.
Hey, Lance, it's Mike. Can I just ask a quick question on that slide? Because this is something I hadn't thought of before. Are you getting requirements from your clients for both, obviously, the office, but also for their employees' homes? Are you starting to see trends like that happen?
I actually am, and I'm having conversations. A lot of people that have gone, if you were to take the aspect of furniture dealerships, right? A lot of furniture dealers are encouraging and trying to get more personal with who their clients were in the past, or architects and specifiers, and they are providing these home environments. The rental furniture companies are providing and even renting out these work from home environments, because people that are working from home for 6 months may not want to invest X number of dollars in a very expensive chair, a desk, things of that nature. They may just need it temporarily. So the monthly subscription-based type of product is a line that I have seen be encouraged to those people. Next one. So here's an interesting aspect, and now we're coming into the more, I'd say, creative and conceptual approaches for conversation, right? And a lot of us have not yet really addressed or thought about subleasing opportunities as of yet, because a lot of us are still preparing to go back to work. But is there a way in the central hub footprint, knowing that you might have a reduced real estate footprint for your occupiers, provide a kind of a secondary sublease zone within your current space? A lot of the spaces we've designed over the last 10 years are very focused in large-scale communal pantries, collaborative areas, and privatized zones of conferencing facilities with already integrated technology in it. And if there is a team A and team B approach, where your team B may be offloaded into a suburban market, you might have 5,000 square feet of available space that might be available for a team B of another company, or it might be available for a team A that needs to just find a new office space. Is there a way to actually coexist in the same space, knowing that all hygiene and healthcare protocols are enforced and moderated, and that the communal zones that used to be your conference tables be converted into something that is a little bit more adaptable? It could be cafes, meeting pods, or even additional office spaces. What can you do with your current real estate footprint to make it more enticing and actually more encouraging to get some economics out of it? Here's the next one. Another interesting approach in conversation I've had with a couple of those in the broker-based market is there has been interest about short-term leases in suburban markets for 2 or 3 years. Knowing in the conversation that I just brought up right now, what do you do when you are presented with a 2 or 3 year sublease in a suburban market? Do you invest X number of dollars in hard construction costs? Knowing that it's so short term and you still can't gauge when there will be a cure for this thing. Are there means and methods for flexibility and low overall hard cost construction to basically fill out a space for your company's professionals? There is an aspect of pop-up offices and flexible office space that might be done basically off furniture environments within, I say, pre-built or white box spaces, which occupiers can use as a kind of a hub or an office space for employees to come to. And the flexibility of these pop-up offices, whether it be occupier installed or landlord installed, is that they are flexible zones. They can be shifted and moved for the evolution of our kind of COVID protocols. But the overall cost for construction, the timeline for the construction is substantially reduced because a lot of the environment is already furniture based. So it's purely just shipment and install based. Next one. So what we're trying to get to is we have to provide the environments that are safe. We have to provide professional environments. And in doing so, we have to entice and encourage and regain the confidence of our staff and our employees, our tenants, to come back to work. But we all know very respectfully it's going to be an evolved concept, and we need to actually have the flexibility to shift and flow and have the right design solutions to do so.
Well, that's great, Lance. Thank you. And what I'm going to do, folks, is after Justin speaks, I'm going to launch a poll, and that will allow you to do 2 things. One, you'll be able to answer some questions, but you can also say, yeah, I actually want to learn more about any specific information from Lance and Bocon and Justin and Boxer. And so you'll get a chance to do that. One thing that Lance and I have not talked about, but hopefully he'll be okay with, is they've actually put together a pretty thorough playbook that they're going to all of their existing customers with. It's like 40 pages and keeps evolving, and it's brilliant. It's got all kinds of strategies for multi-tenant buildings, single occupier buildings, mixed use buildings, literally everything from lobby redesign to floor space redesign, with a lot of great ideas. I think he might be willing to share that playbook with some of you who reach out and ask. So I think that's also an option. Well, cool. Well, then with that, I'm going to hand it over to Justin. And Justin, tell us a little bit about Boxer and all the various initiatives that you guys have and how you're responding to all of this.
Sure. Thanks for having me and so forth. I'm Justin Siegel. I'm the president of Boxer Property and also the founder of Stemmons Enterprise, which is our software company. A little bit about Boxer. You could think of Boxer as the big orange circle there in everything we do. We have north of 15 million square feet. We're distributed around the country with a headquarters in Houston. We've got about 140 give or take buildings, split mostly office, but we have some hotels, we do some lending, we have some retail, but the majority of what we do is office buildings, and typically kind of B-class suburban office buildings in secondary and tertiary markets. We also have kind of a subset of what we do called Work Style, which is kind of our flexible space brand. It's really a subset of Boxer overall. Now, these things are no fun if we don't have some disagreement. So I'm going to take offense at something that Lance said. It was such an offhand comment. He kind of ran through it quickly. He talked about like markets like New York and then lesser markets. And I just want to say, as someone who's made a career in what you might think of as lesser markets, this is our time. The suburban stuff, the pendulum is swinging back, right? And the concept of kind of living or being in an ultra dense city like suburban, major urban core with public transportation and elevators that you have to go up and switch in the middle to another elevator is just seems very different than it used to. And someone who grew up in New York, in the city, I love that stuff, but right now happy to be here in Houston. So I feel like this is going to be a little bit like the Depression, in the sense that somebody who lived through the Depression will always feel a certain way about leaving food on your plate. Like you got to finish everything you eat. I don't care if this person was 90, but when they went through the Depression, they remember it the rest of their life. I think that people who are designing spaces, people who are renting spaces, and even to some degree people who are occupying spaces, certainly the people that sign the leases are going to be thinking about this kind of stuff even after there's a vaccine for this particular experience. We can't unsee what we've seen. And I think the pendulum is kind of swinging back towards less dense suburban, low-rise type stuff. So normally, in something like this, you talk about all the positive stuff and spin it in a positive way for you. I would like to say, in a moment of vulnerability, that it really sucks right now to own hotels and retail properties. So that portion of what we're doing, not so exciting. If this were a hotel panel, I probably would not have attended. On the other hand, the office stuff is very interesting, and I think fortunately 90% of what we do is office, and I feel a little bit right now like if you remember those old sight gags where I think it was Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin was standing there and the house falls down and they're standing right where the window is and it's like, hey, I'm fine. What I'm going to talk about is not only what I would do, but very fortunately and somewhat luckily what we have been doing. And this stems from our realization many years ago that, we had to do something that was non-traditional office. So you see on the left, there's Boxer Property. That's kind of our regular website. It shows everything that we're doing. On the right is another website for Work Style that shows a subset of our offices that are set up as flexible space. Next slide. And what we mean by flexible space is really actually kind of interesting. So we market at the same time to 3 different types of users. In the yellow, you've got the individual users. This would be a startup, you know, a small company, an individual who wants a single office or room for 3 or 4 people. And those people are coming through work style spaces. They're signing, you know, maybe a 1-year deal at the most. You know, and we always have a cancellation policy in there where we can cancel it or we can move them. Sometimes we're even doing 30-day licenses. You know, it's typically a license, not a lease. On the other hand, in blue, you have existing tenants in the building who are large traditional tenants, and they look at that yellow space as available to them. You know, you need some overflow. You know, there's a pandemic and we need to expand a little bit. You know, we can have that space available for them in no more than 30 days. And very often there's, you know, spots where they can take it immediately. So it's flexible in that sense. And then the green is we also market that directly to new large prospective tenants, even if we have smaller users in there, right? And we think of this as a covered spec play. So that flexible space actually can have several different audiences at the same time. And, you know, let's say you're a full floor user and you need a space. Here it is, it's all built out, ready to go. We just have to ask these people to move down a floor, and it's within our rights and the license to do that. Next slide. So this approach has you know, become suddenly very interesting as all of the WeWorks and other groups like that have run into very significant problems. JLL recently came out with a thing that called us the largest low risk co-working operator in the country. These numbers are a little off. I think our portfolio in this area is higher, and plus I don't use the word co-working, but it is nice to see what we're doing kind of recognized that way. Next slide. So when we think about the language we're using, I want to take a second about that, because there's all these different things that kind of don't have real definitions. What I would say that we're doing is really kind of a combination of executive suites and collaborative spaces. So kind of the top left portion of this circle. We don't have memberships. We don't have shared desks, hot desks, the most unfortunate term, I think, in commercial real estate in a while. You know, and we're not acting as an incubator. And then with the terms axis, we're kind of on the front side. So this is short-term on-demand space. And it's been extremely successful for us and very compelling in today's market, but it did require us to learn some new things that we hadn't really thought of before. So next slide. The first thing is, like, how much of a building should be dedicated to space like this, right? And then the next thing is, how small can you go, right? So if you have a model where you have an attendant, like a community manager in there or something, you know, you need to be at least 25,000 square feet to support that head count. If you can do it without that person, which is what we do, then you can afford to have a smaller block because you don't need a person there all the time. Next slide. Probably the more interesting metric is what's the layout and what are the ratios of kind of shared space to dedicated space to circulation space. And this is something that we spent a tremendous amount of time on, because not only does it have to work for the users, but it also has to work financially. You know, and we've seen lots of things, like it's really fun to be in a WeWork, but it doesn't work financially. You know, and then there's a lot of stuff that works financially, but you don't want to be in there. So getting that mix right took us, frankly, a lot of iterations and kind of experimentation. But what we stuck with the whole time was this concept of having space. And if you can go to the next slide, having spaces that could be marketed in a lot of different permutations and combinations. So if you look at this space, it could be one whole floor for you know, 40 small users. It could be one floor for one big user. This could be divided into 4, 8, you know, 3. I mean, it just is designed so that we can throw up a wall or two here and there and turn it into bigger space. But we look at the ratios of these things and, you know, have figured out, depending on the type of space it is, that, you know, we can make something work both financially and for users if we get the mix right. So just go ahead, James, if you don't mind, just kind of go through the next slides. These are just some examples of spaces that we do. Most of the hold here for a sec. You can see that there's a lot of focus on individual space here. And although there are shared spaces, the ratios are kind of right, and I think they're kind of right for today. You can't afford to do this in a downtown office building in a place like New York or London or whatever, but near where people live, you absolutely can. So if you just scroll through, James, and you can see, you know, a bunch of things that we have actually done. These are our projects that we've built, and some of these are very small. A whole tenant could take the whole thing, or you know, it could be split up for a lot of different people. But what people want right now is in some ways what they've always wanted, is they want to see other people. They want to be in a place where other people are around. It's not going to work to always be at home. You know, they want a reasonable level of amenities, but they also want their own space, and they want to be able to close the door and have their stuff and not have everybody looking over their shoulder. So that's worked very well for us. And what we found is that in this market, people are spreading out more and kind of coming to grips with the fact that working at home is not really going to work on a long-term basis. But finding a place where people can come and still be safe and have the best parts of the office experience, you know, without the scary parts, makes a big difference. And I'll say, just because of our context here, one of the scary parts is things like, you know, how you get in and out and touching things and so forth, where on one hand, we're going and putting in a bunch of these door pulls where you use your foot, you know, which is like, that's a really easy one. We're also using Openpath to let people in and out, you know, without having to go through all the normal stuff that, you know, where you're touching everything and so forth. So the ability to move people in and out and provide a positive experience for them is huge.
That's great.
Hey, Justin, James, can I just ask just a quick question? Do you see a strategy for your company to repurpose some of that retail and hospitality space for the shared office sector?
Well, I think, I mean, it's very property specific. You know, for example, we have a hotel in Crested Butte. You know, nobody would really be officing there, but it's a low-rise hotel. Every place, it's like condos. You know, everyone has its own kitchen. It's a vacation hotel. It'll do fine. We have a property in Phoenix that is largely focused on convention stuff. You know, it's a meetings hotel. And, you know, that's one where we have to look at it and say, hey, would this be better off as a maybe a retirement community, or, you know, or something else, or maybe you do half and half. So it depends on the property, honestly. I think, you know, you could think of there being kind of like a scorecard that you would go through for somebody getting into a workplace. And it starts with, like, where does this person live? You know, are you living in an apartment building with an elevator that's 30 floors, or are you living in a single family home? And then it's like, how does someone get there? You know, are you driving in your car, you know, or are you in public transportation? When you get to work, can you walk right up, or do you have to wait in line for the elevator and, you know, stand outside while it's cold and so forth? And then, you know, in the workspace, is it properly distanced, and kind of the stuff that Lance was talking about. And I think in order to take existing space that's set up for one category, you have to have something that will work on that scorecard, and you have to be next to something that doesn't work on that scorecard. You know, so, you know, maybe if it's a, you know, hotel in New Jersey right outside of New York, that would be great for offices. But, you know, if there's a bunch of low-rise office buildings around, like in Phoenix, then, you know, maybe it's not such a candidate because that product already exists.
So, you know, if I look at a bunch of the questions that are coming in, I think one of them has to do with whether it's a shared space in an office, whether it's a common area where you have to have a shared resource, coffee machine, door handle, elevator, or, you know, if people are hoteling and sharing space and desks. I use it on Monday, you use it on Tuesday. What do we think the appetite is, and what is the response that we've been hearing from our various clients, customers, tenants, community around cleaning up every surface afterwards, right? So if I hotel at a desk, does it have to be sterilized? Does a firm have to come in and do that? Can I do it myself? Do we have to wait 3 days between people using it so that all the germs have gone away? So what are people thinking about this? How are you dealing with it? Let's just throw it out there.
we're just not doing it. I mean, the hoteling, I mean, certainly for our own employees, like, you know, everyone has their space, and I just wouldn't want to be in that position right now. You know, I think we're really, it's kind of like, you know, we used to maybe leave the keys in the car when we ran into the store, or leave our door unlocked when we went to work. And now you just wouldn't really think of doing that. You know, not because you live in a bad neighborhood or because there's a bunch of car thieves prowling around, but it just doesn't, it's like not good practice. And, you know, I understand that there are business models that were predicated on the idea that people were going to share desks, and there were companies that, you know, crammed everybody into a downtown location and, you know, allowed for some flexibility that way. But I think that it's not interesting right now, and I would be, you know, surprised if it came back very quickly.
And before Lance answers, because I know he's got an answer here, I'm just going to launch the poll, and this will allow you guys to sign up and give feedback on whether you want information from any of us afterwards to get Lance's playbook and the like. There's also a question in there. I have my son's bar mitzvah this weekend, and my wife wants to cut my hair. And I'd like everybody's advice, please, on whether or not you think I should let her cut my hair. So that would be great.
Shameful.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with Justin. I think there is kind of a lack of interest for that type of approach. I will say, when it comes to the protocols of hygiene and the repetitiveness of it, I mean, people are encouraged to do this every 10, 15 minutes whenever a reserved space then becomes unreserved, something we didn't talk about prior. That consistency and then high quantity of wipe downs is truly affecting materiality. I do expect the types of textiles and service material that we use to be replaced in kind. I wouldn't say with a different type or different finish of fit and feel, but something that is as resistant to push forward. In the meantime, though, I am seeing, especially in the base building landlords' lobbies, a lot of protective surfaces, a lot of coatings and such. Just because they don't want to deteriorate their current designs as is.
Very cool. Okay, so I know what we're doing at our office. We're just not going back to the office. So we're having everybody work remote as long as possible, and then we're just letting everybody have their dedicated workstation that they had before. And it's a little less efficient, but I just don't want people going back to somebody else's desk and having to deal with cleaning it up. We're also making sure that everybody is going to self-attest. And so one of the things that I think is that there needs to be a level of personal responsibility out there. A lot of the discussion that people have been having from a landlord and business owner perspective is, you know, I need to take everyone's temperature. I need to wash their hands. I need to basically cut their food for them. Like, that's not how it is. These are adults. They're responsible. They want to come to work. They want to make money. They want to have their business be an ongoing concern. And they need to take their own damn temperature and make sure that they don't leave the house with a fever. And that if they're feeling bad, they wear a mask and they don't touch common surfaces and they clean and wash their hands. And to my perspective, that's what needs to happen. We need to give them the tools to do that and the awareness that they have to do that. But I think that's, from my perspective as an employer, how people should act. And, you know, again, my 2 cents.
So speaking, and I'll fold in. Dave Alpert asked a question about this. You know, kind of how does technology work with these kinds of things? And as an employer myself, and we have over 1,000 employees, so this is a real concern for me. You know, is we need to do things that are right and responsible, but there's a line somewhere. You know, so the kinds of things that we do, I mean, obviously we provide cleaning inside our offices, and we've amped that up in a pretty significant way, but we also have an automatic process that sends a notice to everybody every day with, you know, a reminder and acknowledgement of the appropriate things, and a questionnaire that says, you know, very quickly, and they do it on their phone, I don't feel sick, I haven't been exposed to someone, you know, I haven't traveled to certain places. And if they answer yes to any of those things, it sends a notification to HR, and it tells the person, hey, talk to HR, talk to your supervisor, because there's a liability issue as well here that we need to think about. And the legal impact of all of this kind of stuff is obviously yet to be determined. And there's some, you know, talk about legislating like, who employer responsibility, landlord responsibility. But I think at a minimum, everybody needs to do things that are appropriate and that are, going to show you taking bona fide real efforts to do the right things to protect people in a way that is within your sphere of influence. But, does that extend to taking people's temperature? I'm with James on this one, and I'd say no.
So look, one of the themes that I think has become apparent is that there's a market opportunity, I think, here for a shift in where people go to work. And, we've talked about the appetite that companies have to do this. But I guess, I'll sort of start with Lance and then go to Justin. Are you actually seeing large occupiers who have traditionally had, everybody, commute into some big office start to lease other spaces and start to do this, or is it just talk right now? Are people actually doing it?
So a lot of it's talk right now, right? Because a lot of people are uneasy with the situation because they're unsure of what it is. But I will explain this. Think about this 18 months from now. I mean, leases expire, they all expire. And if you think about, let's say we're sitting in New York. New York real estate is very expensive. And if you have 100,000 square feet, you're spending a premium to get that space. We have learned that remote working is feasibly possible. And if you can have an ancillary market at a reduced rent and encourage to actually have a portion of your base actually work from that space effectively, would you take it? That's the question that everyone would ask. And it may not be COVID related, it may be real estate related. And that conversation may happen 2 years from now, not as a reactionary scenario to today. That's an important part because I do think real estate and costs, as well as the effectiveness that we have proven right that we can do this, will come into play in lease discussions moving forward.
I would like to thank Lance for using the word ancillary instead of lesser this time. I think he's becoming woke.
One thing I said.
We are seeing it. We are seeing it, by the way. I mean, we have, we're still leasing even when things are shut down. A lot of our leases are being done electronically now with nobody actually touring the space. But in the technology world, we think about there's something called a load balancer, and it distributes the load amongst different servers so that you're kind of being optimized and not relying on any one. Companies that have large offices in ultra dense environments need to load balance their offices, and they're doing it, and we're fielding those calls right now. So they're going, look, instead of having one big, huge office on Wall Street, we're going to have, one in Long Island and one in Westchester and one in Connecticut and one in New Jersey. And each one is going to be less per square foot and less dense and closer to where people live. And, the cool kids can have one in Soho or something, and it's still going to work out net positive. So we're seeing those things. And I think that people are learning that you can work in a distributed way. The technologies and the processes and stuff that support that we're doing it right now. So you can't kind of put that genie back in the bottle. I don't believe that people will want to work from home on a long-term basis. You lose the interaction with people and the distractions, and there's a little honeymoon with that right now, but I don't see it as long-term. In addition, the problem is when you add new people to your organization. Right now, everyone knows everybody and no one's really hiring, unless you're selling guns or liquor or something. So if you think about adding new people to the organization, but they never meet everybody because everybody's working from home, how is the culture going to work and so forth? But what we're seeing and what we're actually doing is not only can you de-densify and work, once you're doing New Jersey, Connecticut, Westchester, and Long Island, why not India? So we have a company called STEM Services, and what we do is we host workers from other companies in our office in India, where we have over 300 people. And what happens is we're now operating. We're taking that next step of saying, well, we don't all need to be in one place. We don't all even need to be on one time zone or pay scale, for that matter, because the labor rate arbitrage is big. So I think what we're going to see is not only a de-densification within the actual office, but a de-densification of the offices themselves, including to overseas. And we're going to all be multinational companies before you know it. We've been doing it for 9 years, and it's awesome.
Hey, James, quick question, if you don't mind, from the cheap seats. By the way, Justin, I think that was 4 or 5 Jersey references. So thank you for that very much. I appreciate it. So our audience at CREtech is all about, obviously, real estate technology. And I think we get asked a lot of questions that I'd love to hear from Lance and Justin about. Which specific technologies do you find are moving to the head of the line in terms of implementing in your spaces? I mean, everybody loves Openpath, and I'm sure that's in there, but and I would love to hear more about how you approach the specific technology within these buildings and these properties and these spaces now.
That's a loaded question. It's not that we don't have our ideas and our suggested solutions, but a lot of these things also are exploratory options that haven't been tested for the long haul. I mean, we're doing it day one, and the longevity of it to the 18th month is something I can't attest to. But talking about today and then talk about the future, the things that everyone's embracing today in conversations is obviously UV lighting. When we can implement fresh air intake and technologies, some buildings do not do that, by the way, cannot do that. They cannot actually do it because their systems don't accommodate it, are things that we're definitely doing. The temperature systems as a whole, I know that there's strong opinions here, are things that some companies are encouraging and others are not, kind of based on their own personal preference. But for me, and I guess in the profession that we're working in right now, the technologies when it comes to communication, I think are going to kind of have longevity and legs to it. And for the design atmosphere, outside of the video conferencing, which we're doing a lot of today, there are other technologies, and I promise I won't say any names right now, but there are technologies which allow digital communication of drafting environments and shared resources of imagery. They're actually tools that we can just ship to home for visualization and augmented reality and virtual reality that you can do today, right now, with our current technology. And I had mentioned before, the aspect of projections, whether it be actual physical projections or through, I'd say, secondary equipment, such as an iPad or such things, this 3D virtual environments and models is something that was tested in the market and could be done as well. It's actually encouraging us to embrace some new ideas to communicate design.
I'm going to take a stab at that question, which is particularly loaded for me because I'm the founder of a software company that provides software to real estate firms that allow them to operate. And many of the things that we've been able to do, we've done with Stemmons Enterprise, which is our product. So, just I'll give an unabashed plug for my own system there. But I think that many of the things that people are understanding is that a lot of what we're doing is knowledge work, and so if we're knowledge workers, what kinds of technologies support adding value to information and support having good information and making it available. I've had a lot of calls from people who say, I didn't realize how difficult it was to find something in my company because now we're all working in a distributed way and I can't ask that person, or walk down the hall in the same way. But I think this is a great time for commercial real estate technology to the extent that it actually adds value. And it's not a great time for the bells and whistles type stuff that are somewhat superfluous and difficult to really imagine spending time or effort on. So, I'll leave it to the audience to decide which is which.
Yeah, I'm biased too. So obviously I think that the stuff that adds value is the stuff that needs to be there. So when we started Openpath, part of the reason we went after access control was because it's a mandatory line item from a life safety perspective to have locks on doors and to be able to regulate and control entrance. Think of any commercial building you've ever been in, they almost always have a key card electrified door. So we didn't want to be in a nice to have category. And I think that the question that you always need to sort of think about, and that was the initial conversation where you look at the lens of, is the technology, is the investment that I'm doing today in my building stuff that I need for the long term? Am I future proofing my building so that this will retain value over time post the COVID crisis and make your building pandemic ready, make your building smarter, reduce your operating costs, improve your efficiency, greater control, your ability to, attract compelling tenants who want to pay a premium. I think that for me is the lens I use to look at any investment. And frankly, from a design perspective, I think you also have to think about not just the way people work, but what people are willing to pay for. And that means you have a real-time conversation with your prospects, your tenants and your customers. And you'll find that it's a completely, wide pendulum of some people are willing to pay for the optimum experience, kind of like, Google hires masseuses to come in and massage their employees, and they have a big cafeteria and they do all this amazing stuff. And then, Bernie's trucking company is just like, hey man, we have a coffee machine and that's about it. And no offense to Bernie, I love him. He does great sessions. But I think that's the thing. Like, there's just going to be all different puts and takes, and you got to do what's right for your property, your building, and your tenants. So look, we have a lot of other questions there, and we've got a little time. I'm happy to see that the vote was just more or less that I should get a haircut, I should let my wife do it, and I should stay married, which is good. It seems likely that we won't be able to get to the fight to the death that we wanted to have. But if you tune in next week, I have a high level of assuredness that someone will be stabbed sometime during the entire presentation. I'm not saying by who, Michael, but there's a high likelihood someone will be stabbed. Look, the contact information for everybody's right here. A lot of you want to get the playbook from Lance. You've signed up in the poll. We'll make sure that you get it. If not, you can email Lance directly. If you have any questions about Stemmons and the cool technology that they have, the workspace and flexible workspace product that Justin has, and just Boxer in general, Justin's available and eager to speak to people. He needs more friends and he's looking for any level of companionship. So please, send him an email. Michael Beckerman is shy and he doesn't like to talk to people. Don't send him any emails. And of course, me, I just live off of it. So this is what I do every Thursday. Any final comments? Maybe we'll do a lightning round and we'll start with Lance, then go to Michael, and then go to Justin. Final comments or thoughts on any of these things?
I honestly think the evolution of conversation is so critical, and the aspects of what we're talking about now, it's changing week by week. That we were in conversational basis about theorizing solutions 4 weeks ago, and now that we're 8 weeks in, we're trying to effectively use those solutions and implement them for its realistic nature. So the conversation we're having today is going to change 4 weeks from now too, and we all have to be prepared for it.
All right, cool.
So I was, I wouldn't say I was criticized, but someone in the question said that I hadn't answered the question of what people should do with their property going forward. So I'll say this: if it's in a suburban location that people don't have to take mass transit to, I wouldn't do anything. And if you're in an ultra dense urban core, you could try knocking off the top 20 stories of the building. If that doesn't work, I would call your lender and explain to them that we should renegotiate the loan, because that's what's going to happen anyway.
I would just add, James, that another great webinar, and the comments are extraordinary. I think you've covered the how and the why. I think the big question we're all sort of struggling with is the when, right? Which nobody knows, but it's every conversation that I have is, when do you think companies are going back to work in whatever capacity that means? So I'm hoping you're going to answer that for us at some point, please.
Yeah, I would certainly love to know the answer to that myself, but I'll tell you this.
No one knows the answer.
I will tell you, from the minute this thing started, I have a cousin who's an epidemiologist at a large pharmaceutical company, and we had a family call, and he came in and he said to me, this is going to be a couple of years until we are back to any semblance of normal. And that's just the time it takes to, deal with this kind of stuff. So we need to do things in the short term to get our economy going. We need to do things in the short term to make sure that we're safe, like we've done with Flatten the Curve, and like we'll do with getting back to work in a measured and reasonable way. But I think that this is a pivot point for our economy and our country. It's a pivot point for a lot of other nations as well. And, my hope is that the best parts of human nature come out, and we find a way to, come across a lot of the boundaries and the borders that have been built up in the last 4 or 5 years by the various governments. And we open up our economies, we do more business and commerce together, we share medicines and best practices, and we find a way to come out of this stronger, rather than the isolationist bullshit that has been basically prevalent across politics in every country of this world. So there's
James for president, man. James for president. You got my vote.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate all the panelists coming together. Lance, Michael, Justin, this has been great. Tune in next week, next Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have another part 6. Don't have the topic worked out exactly yet, but send me an email if you've got a good idea or want to participate. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, James.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Lance.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you, guys.